This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, to another edition of Open Mic Night. I am your host, Notes Lukey, and on today's episode, a big incident on Sunday at the Michigan-Wisconsin men's basketball game. Juwan Howard striking a Badger assistant, and now he is suspended for the rest of the year. I'm going to give my thoughts on this situation after I've watched the video many times, and I've read some articles about some quotes after the game and the post-game stuff. I'm trying to piece all this together, this incident with Juwan Howard, like many of you as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And also, in the second half of the podcast, I want to switch it up a little bit this week. I'm going to talk about a sport that I've never, ever talked about ever on this show. And to be honest, something that I never even imagined talking about ever. And it's an experience I had at my buddy's house watching the Daytona 500 for NASCAR. I thought I'm going to share my experience about it because I don't think NASCAR is as big up here in the Midwest as it is in the South. The majority of the races are in the South, but they have the MIS course over in Brooklyn. I know that's a little bit of a NASCAR. They have some NASCAR races over there as well. Hopefully everybody had a great weekend out there. Sorry I'm getting you this a little bit late. I've just been extremely, extremely busy here at John Carroll. We've had a lot of events going on. We had our conference swim championships last weekend where we won our 6th straight championship in both men's and women's swimming. So very dominant there. And then also the OEC tournament, the conference tournament is beginning in basketball. I like to call it February fever. I know everyone calls it March Madness for Division I and all that, but for this Division III, all the tournaments start earlier. Why not? February fever. I tried to coin that phrase yesterday when I was calling our women's basketball game. So I apologize if my voice is a little bit raspy today, but just a lot of talking, a lot of commentating as well the last couple of days. But definitely want to get this out to you before here on a Wednesday. So I want to lead off with this Juwan Howard story, and I think it's very, very interesting. As a lot of us know, Michigan has been really struggling this season. They have an above 500 record, but 14-11, 8-7 in the Big Ten. Not really what Michigan was expecting. I mean, this is a team that, they've had some success in the tournament before. Obviously, with Coach John Beilein. Then John Beilein leaves. They hired Juwan Howard. So it's been a pretty uneventful season for Michigan up until this point. So, have I watched a minute of Michigan basketball this year? No. Have I watched a minute of Michigan State basketball this year? Not really. I have not been into college hoops as much this year as I usually am. But I kind of mentioned it in the teaser at the beginning. I was at my friend's house watching the Daytona 500, which we'll get to later. But all of a sudden, I start getting texts from people saying, "Look what happened with Juwan Howard in Wisconsin." And then I see the headline, Juwan Howard throws punch. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what happened here? What has escalated? So I said, okay, I'm gonna watch this video and see what happened. And what I saw was even more shocking than I originally thought. I mean, these teams were in the handshake line. First of all, usually the coach leads the handshake line. But it didn't seem like Juwan. It seemed like Juwan was kind of back in the handshake line. And when him and Greg Gard, Wisconsin's head coach, shook hands, you could tell Juwan was very upset. I mean, he almost grabbed Gard and was pointing at him and saying, "Look, you could just see his facial expressions. He did not. He just had something to say to Gard." And then all of a sudden, the team starts coming in, both teams start trying to pull some guys away. And then all of a sudden, one of Wisconsin's assistant coaches, his name escapes me, but he came in, and then all of a sudden, Juwan Howard just basically punches him in the face. What the heck? At a college basketball game. Then after that, oh my gosh, then everyone started getting into it. I'm surprised this didn't turn into the Malice at the Palace. Very uncalled for. Very uncalled for in any sport. I just feel like it's just such a basic rule. Just common sense. After a loss, after a win, really, you don't go up and punch a coach. You don't. That's from like Little League to professional. You just don't punch a coach. Juwan Howard, what he did was childish. And then we got a little bit of some, I guess, explanation, if you will, after the game, where Greg Gard was asked about the incident, and he said something about how he had called those timeouts. Now, I think that's really what Juwan Howard was upset at. He was upset that Wisconsin was up by 15, they were up by 15, and he decided to call the timeout with like a minute left. And you're thinking, and I think Juwan Howard just took that to offense, and he was just saying, why would you call a timeout? What are you trying to rub it in? I think Juwan Howard took it a different way. However, Greg Gard tried to explain to Juwan why he did it. And this is why. According to him, according to Greg Gard, he called those timeouts at the end of the game. There's a rule. They only had 4 seconds to get it over half court. 4 seconds. And of course, Michigan pressing tightly. You had those bench guys in. Called a timeout, said that, and then that would automatically reset it back to 10 seconds. So that would give his team more time to go, into the front court and get the ball up. Why would he want to put his team in a situation that they can't succeed in? Give those, the guys that just checked into the game, give them a fresh 10 seconds so that they have enough time to regroup and get it in. This was not... So after Greg Gard said all that, in my opinion, I don't mind it. I don't. I'm a big believer in setting your players up for success as a coach. I don't care if you're up by 15. I don't care. You don't want to give the ball away to Michigan. You want to keep the ball. I get it. Call the timeout, especially if you have those bench guys in that just came off the bench that are cold, really. Why would you want to put them in a situation where they have 4 seconds left when Michigan's pressing tight? Call a timeout, regroup, get the fresh 10, and get the ball past half court. So Greg Gard tried to explain, according to him, his press conference, he tried to explain to Juwan why he used that timeout. And I thought Greg Gard handled it professionally at the end, explaining the reasons why he took the timeout, which 100% made sense. Why would you want to put those players in a bad situation? But Juwan took it differently. Juwan thought they were just trying to rub it in. It's like in football. It's like if they call it, you call timeout with a minute left and you're up by 35 or whatever. It's like one of those things. Just trying to rub it in even more. I get it's been a tough season for Michigan. Been a very disappointing year. I mean, this is a team that's on the verge of not even making the tournament. And, all of a sudden, Juwan just explodes. And, I've seen it in sports where there's just some little moments where you just never know when someone's going to go off. And just that was a moment, in my opinion, that Juwan Howard just went off. And just something triggered him with that timeout, and he just took it the wrong way. And Greg Gard didn't, so it just, Greg Gard was even saying, I don't think Juwan was aware of the rule. If you call a timeout in that situation, you get a fresh 10 to get it over. I can almost guarantee you it did not seem like Juwan's initial reaction was that. I'm really curious to see what Phil Martelli thought. Phil Martelli will be the coach for the next 5 games for the Wolverines to finish out the regular season as Juwan Howard is suspended. Phil Martelli, of course, was the longtime head coach at St. Joseph University in Philadelphia. Very, very esteemed, very well-liked, very respected coach. And now he is the associate head coach for Juwan Howard. So he will be the head coach. Obviously has had plenty of experience as a head coach. I really want to know what he would say after the game. This is a guy that handles himself with a lot of class and, knows the rules. It'd be interesting to know. So say Phil Martelli was the head coach in that situation. Would he be all mad at Greg Gard? It's not good. Not a good scene. And, I could get into the reasons why Juwan Howard was even hired by Michigan. I remember a couple years ago when he was hired, I was not really a fan of the move, especially, a guy to replace John Beilein. Not a member of John Beilein's staff or anything. Zero head coaching experience whatsoever. Zero. And I just kind of thought, I don't know, this kind of is an example of Michigan just not caring about basketball. If they cared about basketball, they would have made a right hire, actually, a guy that actually has some head coaching experience. But he has none. And I get he's a Michigan man, as they like to say, and he was a Fab Five member. I think being the Fab Five member had a little bit of some cachet as well, just because there's the whole rift with the Fab Five right now in the University of Michigan, and I just want to know. I wonder too if Juwan was hired in the first place just to help try to get that Fab Five back together. Try to get the apology that Chris Webber and all them, especially Chris Webber. The apology with Ed Martin and all that. All this kind of came to mind because it was just such crazy timing because I was watching the Fab Five documentary that weekend. Again, I like every once in a while I like to watch it again because it's just such a great documentary on ESPN. And, then, Juwan Howard's interviewed and all that. And then just this incident that on Sunday, I just kind of connected the dots a little bit. So, he had such a great year, and a lot of people thought, okay, well, maybe he's starting to recruit a little bit, but just this season has just gone haywire. And like I said, I'm not really qualified to speak on why it's been like this for Michigan. I just haven't watched enough games, but it's definitely not a good sign. And, if you're Ward Manuel and company, it's, you just gotta win. You gotta start winning. This has not been a good year for Michigan basketball. That is for sure. So, Juwan Howard suspended for the rest of the regular season, the 5 games before the Big Ten tournament. He will be reinstated before as the Big Ten tournament begins. So they'll at least have him. But I don't know, this Michigan team, especially after an incident like that, this is not good. I don't know if they can rebound or not. I mean, this is a team that got destroyed by Michigan State and all that. But my first initial reaction was that Juwan was just really, really upset that they lost. But then I learned later that it was because of the timeout that Greg Gard took, which I think is just absurd. Just get over it. If the team and even if Greg Gard called the timeout just to rub it in, so just say that. Obviously, that was not the reason, but just say Greg Gard want to call a timeout. Oh, let's rub it in on Michigan. That's no excuse to punch a coach. None. There is no excuse to punch a coach. Beat them. Go beat them. That's how you counter all that. Beat them. I don't know. It was ridiculous. I didn't care for that incident at all. And we'll see. Michigan will have to suffer the consequences without him being their head coach. And I thought afterwards, Juwan, he handled the apology well, and after striking the assistant, and it's Ward Manuel, I thought, said the right things. The athletic director for Michigan as well, but just not a good incident, and not good to see really for college basketball. Not good. You don't see Coach Izzo doing that. And as we all know, he's the king of basketball in the state of Michigan. Just saying. All right, I want to end on a little bit of a high note, if you will. I want to talk about my experience watching my first NASCAR race. I know it's a little bit of a slow news week, so I decided, I want to talk about NASCAR. And some folks might just be turning this podcast off right now once I mention this. But, so my friend, shout out to my friend Ryan Height from John Carroll. Him and his dad are huge NASCAR fans. And their basement is actually full of sports memorabilia as well, which with autographs and all this kind of stuff, which I think is awesome in itself. But they're huge NASCAR fans. And, I got the text saying, hey, come on over for the Daytona 500. And I'm thinking, NASCAR? Are you kidding me? I've never watched a NASCAR race in my life. Am I even going to enjoy this thing? And so I said, okay, I'll just want to check it out, see what NASCAR's like. Obviously it's not really as big in the Midwest as it is in the South. Never even been close to a NASCAR race, NASCAR track or anything in my life. So we went, and I got to say, it was fun. Now, there's certain times the Daytona 500 is it's kind of like the pinnacle of racing. This is the race that you want to win. I mean, they're in the pregame, they're interviewing all these drivers, and they were saying that they would rather give up all their wins that they've had in their career just to get one Daytona 500 win. And I'm thinking, holy cow, this is a huge race. This is a bigger race than I thought. And I knew coming in that, I've heard of the Daytona 500, but I didn't think it was that big of a race. I just thought, great venue, maybe you get a lot of Sprint Cup points or whatever it is. But this race was a way bigger deal to racers than I thought. It's sort of and my buddy described it to me as it's like the Super Bowl of racing. Except it's the first race of the year instead of it being the last. And I was like, okay, this is big. So and Fox, Fox covers the NASCAR, and it made me think, it's really awesome, this commentary that they have. I mean, they have about 7 or 8 commentators. They have a couple up in the booth, and then there's a couple that are interspersed between the turns, and then there were some that were in the crew pits and all that. And it was really, really interesting because first of all, these people are very passionate about NASCAR. A lot of the commentators were ex-drivers, and they knew all about the strategies that people use to drive. And there is a lot more strategy into racing than I thought there was. They're talking about how there's some guys that are, the front of their car is just pinned up against the back of someone else's car, and they're racing in that circle. These guys are going 190 miles an hour. And they're talking about how some strategies with, you don't want to be, as the car that's in the back, you don't want to be breathing in all that dirty air because that's going to ruin your filter of the car, and that's not going to, that's not going to do well. You're going to have to go and get it fixed. Go back into the pit stop. Just some of those little things. And then I thought what was really cool is the different camera angles that they had, because they would go, some drivers had GoPros on their helmets so you could see them as they were driving. Some cars had a little camera underneath as well, so you could see them speeding off with the road underneath with all these other cars in front. And then what I thought was really cool was you could hear the talk between the race car driver and the spotter and the crew chief. So the crew chief is the guy that's kind of at the, he's the guy that's in the pit stop who is fixing all, when they have to go in for repairs. He's the one that leads the crew that takes the tires off and fixes the windshield and fixes the damage that was done if there was any and all that. put the fuel in. And then there's the spotter. The spotter is the guy that sits up at the top of the track, and he is watching to see if there's any tactical advantages that they can gain based on passing cars and whatnot. And it's just really interesting, too, because there were 7 crashes at the Daytona 500 this year. 7. And it was a little bit exciting when there was a crash, I will say. And they analyze these crashes like crazy. Anytime a crash happens, that is like their big thing that they put on TV. They have all these different angles of when crashes happen. They'll go to the angle of the driver in the car. They'll go to the angle with one of those cameras underneath the car, like I was mentioning earlier. And then they'll have all these angles about how the car flips up, and one car it tumbled over. I think it was on lap 63 or something. And so then what happens is if there's a crash, then there's a caution. So that means you can't pass anyone. You're just, but it's still, because they're still driving around. So it counts as a lap, in the race, no matter how long the caution is. But then sometimes there's the yellow caution, which means you can keep riding, but you can't pass. And then the red caution means you got to stop. It can completely stop, 0 miles an hour. So there was one red caution because they had to clean up a bunch of debris on the track after there was some crashes. But it's just really interesting because my buddy was saying some of these guys he thought were doing it on purpose. Driving into one guy, hitting the wall, and then crashing. Because then there were guys that are out of the. Once you have a significant damage, you're out. You're basically out of the race. So it's a survival of the fittest a little bit. And so, yeah, not everyone finishes the race. It was just crazy. But then there were some moments of it where it was kind of boring, where everyone would just be in 1 or 2 lines and not really passing each other. But I'll tell you what, the crashes from a viewer standpoint was the best from that. And they just analyzed it like crazy. And it was cool to see. I had never watched a NASCAR race in my life, and just there were so many fans there too in Daytona, and I think that's what made it special too. Was just the amount of fans and the energy, and of course on the broadcast you can't even hear it because those engines are just zooming by so fast. Couldn't even hear the crowd till the end when they were announcing the winner, but it's just really amazing to see the tactics that are involved in this. With NASCAR and a sport that I just never knew I would ever watch. But, it was good to watch that once. Am I hooked on NASCAR for the rest of my life? Probably not, but it's something that next time I watch it might be good to understand. Like I understand it a little bit better. So I don't know about anyone who's listening to this podcast or not, but I don't know if any of you guys have ever been out to a race at MIS before? I don't really think I've ever met someone that's been to a race over there. I don't know if there's any NASCAR fans listening to this, but makes me think maybe one day I'll go check out a race at MIS because they were saying how different it is watching in person, how fast these cars go rather than just on TV. It is a completely different experience. That is for sure. Make sure to tune into all the other great podcasts on the podcast network. Doc and Jock, the original podcast, always great content. The wrestling podcast, WWE, as well. Also the Michigan podcast. I'm sure Steve Dace and company has a lot to say about this Juwan Howard incident. And the Fan Report, a podcast made by fans for fans, always talking great stuff about the Pistons and all that. I know they had All-Star Weekend in Cleveland here this past week. And really, at least around John Carroll and the people I know in Cleveland, it didn't seem like there was a lot of hype around it. But that's just from my opinion. I'm sure there was some hype around the city about it as well. I did not go to any of the All-Star festivities over here in Cleveland at all. I didn't watch a minute of the dunk contest or anything like that. Part of it was just I wasn't interested. But part of it too was just I was very busy with other things this weekend as well. Thanks again, folks, for tuning in. And please make sure to tune in next week only on Open Mic Night.